Thank you for this chance to share my vision of a better tomorrow. But I want to start by taking us back to a different Flint, not what you're hearing in the news. Over a century ago, Flint was the birthplace of General Motors. But more importantly, Flint was the birthplace of the American dream. And you may know this story. It was 1936. And for 44 days, auto workers sat down and occupied a series of car plants in Flint, demanding decent wages, demanding better working conditions. And even our Flint kids, our heroic Flint kids raised their voices, fighting for a chance at a better life, at a better future. And it took the personal intervention of the governor of Michigan and President Roosevelt to end that strike. And labor won. Their union, the UAW, was recognized. And for the first time, working people had access to that American dream, a good life, living wages, housing, healthcare, great schools, and even a pension. And it's hard to believe, but at one point, Flint had the highest per capita income in the entire nation and some of the best public health indices. Flint was hailed as one of the world's greatest industrial cities, a promised land for generations of workers to come. But what happened in Flint, like in many of our Rust Belt cities, was decades of crisis. Disinvestment, unemployment, racism, poverty, violence, decline of unions, population loss, crumbling schools, and almost every disparity you can think of. And this is no one's dream. And as a pediatrician, I'm in the business of dreams. It is my job and very much my privilege to make sure that our children are healthy today. But more importantly, it is my job to make sure that our children have the brightest future possible. And what was happening in Flint and what was happening in our water was threatening the tomorrows of all of our kids. And I want you to meet one of our kids. This is Lily. Isn't she adorable? She's a daughter of Flint. She just came in for her 4-year checkup. And Lily was born into a city that was almost bankrupt. Born into a city taken over by state-appointed emergency management. And that emergency manager's job was one thing. It was austerity, to save money, no matter what the cost. And he severed a half-a-century relationship with fresh, pre-treated Great Lakes water and instead started drawing water from the local Flint River. But that Flint River wasn't being treated properly. It was missing an important ingredient called corrosion control. And the heroic people of Flint, true heroes in the story, they raised their voices. And our Flint kids, our ever-resilient Flint kids, raised their voices. And they raised their jugs of brown water. But this corrosive, untreated water created a perfect storm for the lead that is in our plumbing, that is on all of our plumbing. We were stubbornly slow as a nation to get the lead out of our plumbing. For the lead that is in our plumbing to leach out into our drinking water and into the bodies of our children. And we know what lead does. It's a potent, irreversible neurotoxin. It impacts cognition and behavior, how we think and how we act. And we now know that there is no safe level. And I will give another million times shout out to Dr. Needleman, because that science came from here. It came from your Pittsburgh pediatrician, a giant in the field, a previous Heinz Awardee, who taught us that science, that there is no safe level. And the lead problem is not just a Flint problem. Our children in Flint, our children in Detroit, Baltimore, Chicago, Philadelphia, our country's most vulnerable children have higher rates of lead exposure, as well as every other type of toxic stress that threatens their future. It is an environmental and a social injustice, and in Flint, that injustice only widened. And from the moment that our science spoke truth to power, proving population-wide lead exposure, my focus went back to Lily. and to those thousands of other kids just like her. So now in Flint, we've rolled up our sleeves, and we are doing something that hasn't been done before. We are building a model public health program to preserve the tomorrows, the dreams of our children, wrapping them with science-based interventions to promote their development, early literacy, home visiting, universal preschool, school health services, nutrition, healthcare access, and more. These are things that all kids need, especially our youngest and our most vulnerable. And we're taking a line from a playbook of Frederick Douglass. So as you know, he was recently reborn. He said 150 years ago, "It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men." And in a city that is known for building strong cars, we are now building strong kids. But that is not enough. To truly fix Flint, and Flint's everywhere, it will take a rebuilding of the American dream from the ground up, because the most potent medication that I can prescribe is to lift our families out of poverty. And this is where Flint's struggle is everyone's struggle. From the Rust Belt to rural America to our coasts and beyond, black, brown, and white, too many of our nation's children are waking up to that same nightmare, that nightmare of poverty, injustice, lost democracy. We can do better than this. We must do better than this. And that is my vision for a better tomorrow. And in the city where that American dream was first born, we are working towards that vision, striving for equality and justice and opportunity. We will not be defined by this crisis, but rather by our response, a response that proactively and positively invests in our kids and their futures. We owe them this. And their futures is definitely my job. It's my oath that I took as a pediatrician to care for these kids, but it needs to be all of our jobs. For our kids in Flint and our kids everywhere, they're counting on us. Thank you.